are now live.
Are you going live or are you just recording a podcast episode?
We're going to do both.
Okay, cool.
Nice.
Awesome. Let me check X. Can people ask questions? If so, that'd be cool.
I do have the chat feature active, so they should, yeah, they're welcome to jump in.
I don't see it on my end, Paul. I don't know if you tag me somewhere.
I'm going to do that right now.
Oh, okay.
It is live. It's let's see here. Yep, protocol post is streaming.
Where can I retweet it?
I'm gonna go ahead and quote tweet.
He's gonna have to
now.
tag us in it so then we can see where he posted it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll turn this into a podcast episode as well, Jorge.
Sorry, what?
So this is, I guess, Paul's going live with it right now, so people can ask questions or whatever. We could just, have a conversation. Right. People could tune in, but there will be we'll post-produce a podcast episode from this as well.
Okay, amazing. That's even better. So we can get people's
get the best
feedback.
Of both worlds.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, and actually, I'm gonna write this weekend a follow-up on that Reason article I sent you. So they want me to do a follow-up article.
Nice,
so
perfect.
It will be interesting.
Fantastic. We can
because
do
the questions that I get today, I know that I need to. No, and I know that, for example, the questions that I get today are things that I need to include in the next one, for example.
Yeah.
So it will allow me to. Exactly.
Okay. You tagged us. All right. Let me see. I'll reshare this. All right.
I'm going to go ahead and retweet it from Bitcoin Day.
Did you get the tag, Jorge?
Yes, I just retweeted.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Paul, we're going to kick it off then. Sound
perfect. Good? Yep. Good to go.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to Cypherpunk'd, where we explore money's history, crypto's future, and Web3's role in advancing human rights, freedom, and digital liberty. Today's guest is Jorge Jraissati, the president of the Economic Inclusion Group and a leading advocate for financial freedom. He recently published a powerful article in Reason magazine warning that thousands of Americans are being unjustly cut off from their own bank accounts. He argues the problem is much deeper than politics and is embedded in a broken system of financial surveillance. Jorge, thanks for coming back on.
Thank you, Matty. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody in the production also.
It's good to see you again, man. It's been a while.
Yes, exactly. I wish I could be in Florida, man. Honestly, I love Florida so much. So
it was great having you here. So whenever you want to come back, let me know.
Of course, yes.
So let's kick this off talking about what, I know I've experienced this, but have you experienced this well, Jorge, debanking?
No, I have not experienced banking, but I know I have many friends who sadly have done.
Yeah, so can you explain what debanking is and why it's turning into such a big issue? Why don't you give a little background on that?
Debanking, the way I explain the issue of debanking is that it's a phenomenon in which you lose your access to financial services without explanation, without any due process, and without any kind of possibility to solve the situation. Without any kind of warning also. So one day you wake up and you know that all your bank accounts are closed and that you don't know how to pay for rent, how to pay staff, how to pay suppliers. In the case of a foundation, you don't know how to send money to your grantees. In the case of a business, you don't know, again, how to operate. So it's a very, very problematic situation.
Yeah. It's definitely, if you have a business, it's like you have all this stuff on auto pay. You've got, all the services that your business needs to run. You've got employees or contractors. It's incredibly disruptive to be debanked. And, a lot of times they, like you said, they don't even tell you what the deal is, right? For me, they said, hey, you're in a risky industry. So all of a sudden your business is risky. So we're cutting you off in 2 weeks or whatever.
Guys, I'm sorry to chime in.
Exactly.
George, your video quality is greatly diminished right now. I'm not sure if there's an internet connection issue, but for the sake of the quality of this episode, I definitely would like to.
Let me change Wi-Fi to see if the other one is better. 1 second.
It just might be the streaming demands of Riverside, the platform we're using here.
Well, ours is clean, so I think it might be on his side.
We have a
Is
pretty
this
high.
better?
Let's see. It is a bit better. Let's give it a second. Okay, now it's gone back
But
to isolated.
Not great then.
He's probably just using a laptop or something, Paul. I don't think you're going to be able to resolve that, unfortunately.
It was really good in the beginning, but something happened. So I am looking.
I never had this issue. I was using Riverside just a couple of days ago in another interview, and it was like fine.
Yeah, strange.
It would be on his end. It would be his computer. Are you running other tabs or things like that?
No, and I have the most expensive MacBook M4 Pro, like the full gigabyte. So to never have this issue.
I can see the quality. It's changing. It's coming in. It's coming out. Seems like sometimes it gets better. Sometimes it gets worse.
I'm thinking. So check.
Yeah, I'm doing some research right now just to see if there's anything I can do from my side. But here,
I don't think there's anything you can do from your side, Paul. I think this is on his end. It's just his internet connection or his CPU or whatever he's using.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want it to interfere anymore. Unfortunately, okay, now it seems to have frozen. He may be rejoining.
Hover over his actual recording is higher quality. You see what it says up top on the left? Do you see where it says that on the little menu, Paul? Nope. Go down. Go over his screen. Look at the text that forms over his screen. Actual recording is higher quality.
Oh, it does say that. Yeah. That's cool. So for the live stream,
maybe it's just
assuming it's going to be pixelated. Perhaps for the final product, it will be better. That's the hope. Okay, let's not let this interfere anymore. If it doesn't turn out beautifully, then we'll AI render you.
Can you check? Like, can you check if, because exactly especially the recording, that has to be better. That would be great.
Well, unfortunately the final product I won't be able to verify until it's finished processing.
It says it's recording in higher quality, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. So why don't we hop back in here? What prompted you to write this article for Reason?
I mean, I have been working on this debunking issue for the past before we met, like over 2 years, I would say. I just find the debunking problem a heavily misunderstood issue. I found it extremely underexplored. Most people are really not aware about the gravity of the situation or the regulatory causes of debunking, or how many people are being affected, how the Bank Secrecy Act is actually the source of many of these problems. And that's why I write about it. That's why I speak whether in universities or in parliaments. I like to speak about these issues internationally as well, because we need to raise awareness about it. If you involve people, if you have serious, smart conversations with people, you can make changes. But only if people know what's going on, we are able to make decisions as a society. And I wrote this article at Reason, also particularly as a response or as a follow-up of the executive order of Trump at the time, in which an executive order trying to solve the debunking problem, but an executive order that, even though it's in the right direction, it really doesn't go into the regulatory sources of the problem, which, as you know, and of course I would love to know more about your own experience with debunking. As you know, there is many regulatory issues. For example, you mentioned that banks don't tell you why you lose your banking access. And many people then become angry towards banks. Something I explain is that according to the Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering laws in general, banks are not allowed to tell customers why they lost their banking access. It's actually prohibited by the Financial Action Task Force Recommendation 21, if I believe so. So it's just a matter of raising awareness. Mm-hmm.
Jorge, do you know why that they wouldn't allow you to? Why that the Financial Action Task Force can't tell you why you're being debanked? Like why they tell the banks not to tell the people why they're being debanked? Doesn't make like that sounds ridiculous.
So the rationale they have is that if a bank, the rationale comes from anti-money laundering laws. And the reason is that the rationality is that if somebody is cut off from the financial system, this because of some sort of anti-money laundering risk, banks should not tell them why in order to prevent potential money launderers from knowing why they are losing their banking access.
Wow.
So the rationale, which is called the tipping off rule, is to, again, not give clues to people. Of course, that doesn't make any sense because the people who are really criminals, real money launderers, if you lose your banking access, it's a pretty big tell that something is not doing something you're not doing right. So, but that's the rationale behind it, which I believe is a flawed rationale because it just brings so much obscurity to the system.
Yeah, it goes against the foundation of Western civilization and how we have our legal system and property rights of to if you're going to be accused of something to know what you're being accused of and why to be able to defend yourself. I mean the whole premise is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Can you explain the Bank Secrecy Act?
Yeah, this is something.
What exactly the Bank Secrecy Act is?
Yes, and by the way, I want to just make a comment on what you said that the way governments pursue this regulation, these anti-money laundering laws, etc., it really goes against several of the main tenets of Western civilization in general. The fact that you are innocent until proven guilty, the fact that there is due process, the fact that you know why you lose your banking access. All these things, again, are just pillars of Western civilization.
Wow, you said it so eloquently.
The fact also that also, if somebody commits a crime, only that person is liable, but not its entire family or its business partners or people close to them. Because as you know, something that happens with debanking is that not only the person that is, that it has higher levels of compliance is debanked, but also people around them can be debanked because of that. So because it's a network crime, that's the way they said it. So yeah, this is deeply problematic. You made a question about the Bank Secrecy Act. Bank Secrecy Act, again, comes from the 1970s. Really create the whole architecture behind the way our financial compliance system is done. First of all, it asks banks to become some sort of financial policeman. They need to identify anti-money laundering risk, collect all the data from their clients, manage the screening of that data, and ultimately identify money laundering risk. So they put all this pressure on banks, which again have all this data, all this information without any kind of due process. Yeah, please.
It seems like a violation of the Fourth Amendment for the government to be forcing private institutions to do this. I'm surprised we haven't seen this repealed. This just to me just seems it doesn't pass the smell test. It just seems blatantly unconstitutional. That's my first thought just from hearing this. Because basically,
this is a conversation I have had with people, by the way.
These are unreasonable searches, and it's not like the government's using the banks as the middleman to do. This is something that was going on with all these social media companies where they were, censoring people's speech. It wasn't like the social media companies were doing it. Like the whole argument, it's a private institution. It's like no, the government was like breathing down their necks, telling them to censor and do these things. This seems like a very similar situation.
Sadly, it is. It's a situation in which law enforcement agencies delegate the functions of identifying financial crime to financial institutions. When this problem began, or when this situation began, or when this relationship began in the 1970s, the amount of financial information and overall information of a person was way more limited than what it is right now. So right now, people have the entire information out there, because there is not only your financial information, but it's your travel information, your personal information, everything. And everything can be collected and is collected by financial institutions. Most people, the other day I was talking to a friend and he told me that he believes, and this is a Nick Anthony from the Cato Institute, he told me that 80% of people in the US believe that their banking privacy is protected by the Fourth Amendment. But it's actually not the case. So it's actually not. It's not the case. Like, no, there is no warrant. There is nothing. All the information can be shared.
That's, to me, that blows my mind. It just seems ripe for disruption, ripe for a constitutional challenge. What are your thoughts there? What's the pathway forward? I mean, obviously, we haven't even talked about a lot of the second order effects of, all this anti-money laundering stuff, and the fact that these are just laws passed by bureaucrats, and there's no independent mechanism to even test if these things are effective. They just kind of pile on over the years, and you get to a point where you're basically creating all of this bureaucratic mess, and you're capturing all this data, and you're doing all this stuff that's hindering capitalism, hindering economic progress, hindering people from doing things, and the cost is so great. And what is the benefit? I mean, from the data that I looked at, I think 99% of all criminal activity still happens. I mean, they catch no bad guys. So even if your argument is, hey, this is going to make things safer, well, not really, because it's not really working. You've created this insane Orwellian overreach bureaucracy on top of just people operating in their private lives, and it really has no benefit. So, what's the point?
This is totally true. So this extremely complex, extremely overarching financial compliance system, the biggest flaw is that it doesn't achieve what it's supposed to achieve. It doesn't catch people doing real financial crimes.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, all the statistics show that only 1% of the criminal proceedings, are actually recouped by anti-money laundering laws.
Mm-hmm.
And there is not much statistics about this, by the way. So there is clearly a need for greater cost-benefit analysis.
There you go.
So what they do is that they put more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what they do is that they put more and more compliance rules, more and more costly for people, costly for financial institutions, costly for private sector, to the point in which the financial sector becomes so overly regulated than to move money around. It's a nightmare. And again, it doesn't achieve its intended consequence.
I think Web3, crypto, Bitcoin is totally doing an end around on all this because these systems are decentralized and permissionless. How do you think about that?
As you know, I'm a strong proponent of Bitcoin. For me, Bitcoin is a tool for financial freedom, it's a tool for financial inclusion, and it's a way to really bring financial instruments to the billions of people who cannot access it. At the same time, it is very important to protect these new emerging financial tools from compliance pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Many people believe that Bitcoin, for example, is totally resistant or protected from regulation. But the reality is that with enough regulatory pressure. Sorry, I hear an echo.
Yeah, sorry, we lost you for a second.
Now it's better.
Perfect.
No worries. The reality is that if regulatory environment becomes also tough with Bitcoin, the same way it is in the traditional financial system, it will put into tremendous pressure everybody who uses Bitcoin because they will need to do all this extensive compliance. So foundations who receive Bitcoin or companies who use Bitcoin, they will need to do all this intensive amount of compliance. So what we need is to protect this technology from these bad compliance mechanisms, which, as you mentioned, are extremely expensive. In the US, it's $50 billion per year. The more moderate estimations. In Europe, it's $100 billion per year. The cost of anti-money laundering rules, compliance, etc., on the economy. It's a huge cost, and it has all these secondary effects on the economy and on people's financial inclusion.
I think that's a great point, because how do you quantify the second and third order effects? That's the problem with so much of this government bureaucracy is, how does this affect the mother who's trying to do a small business startup, and she can't afford to go through all this procedure, and she can't get access to a bank account while she has to take care of her kids, and she had a startup business that she wanted to start, but they said no, this is too risky, or whatever, right? I mean, the economic consequence, how do you even quantify those second and third order effects? Because you and I both know those are massive, and the government, obviously, it's almost impossible to even compensate for that in the cost benefit analysis.
This is something that we are trying to do, and we're working to assemble a team and do some sort of research, because, as you mentioned, there is so many secondary consequences to this issue. The small business owner who is trying to import products from Latin America or to export products to Central America. In the correspondent banking sector, for instance, the number of correspondent banks operating with the US has been decreasing for the past, I believe, it's like 15 years.
Wow.
Year by year. So exactly. So it means that the transactions are becoming more costly for everybody, especially people in those jurisdictions. Again, the amount of compliance people have to do to have simple businesses that can be more financially complex. All this has tremendous effects on the economy, or the 10% of Americans who in the past 2 years have been unbanked. So 10% of Americans, according to official statistics, have been unbanked in the past 2 years. Not all of them are unbanked. Sorry?
You said 10% of Americans, so 1 in 10 people have been debanked. That's kind of that's a crazy statistic. Is that, you're saying 10% of Americans have been debanked?
Yes, 10% of Americans have been debanked. I believe the statistic comes from the FDIC.
Wow, that's an unbelievable.
Yes. So 10% of Americans have been unbanked in the past 2 years.
Wow.
According to the FDIC, I believe, I can double check, but it comes from an official source, because this is a quote I got from the Treasury Department. Out of those 10%, of course, not everybody is because of anti-money laundering compliance problems. Many are because of financial literacy issues or for other problems. But there is a big chunk of those which they cannot access to banking services because of bad regulation. There is also complaints. So there is 12,000 complaints in the past 2 years of people who have been debanked. So these are official complaints of people who lost their bank accounts. Most of them coming from the crypto, or many of them coming from the crypto assets community. When I mentioned before about the need of cost-benefit analysis on regulation, there also has to be transparency, because a lot of this problem is that we don't know in the US how many people have been debanked. There is no statistics. We don't know why people have been debanked. There is no statistics. So without the statistics, how can we make an assessment of the magnitude and the deepness of this issue? We cannot. So that's why transparency and cost-benefit analysis are the first thing we have to do to actually solve the situation.
One of the most chilling aspects of all this is the political weaponization of this Orwellian infrastructure that's in place by the government. The ability to politically debank your opponents. We're watching this happen all over. It feels like all over the Western civilization right now. Even here in the United States, we saw this with Trump and his family. I mean, they were debanked from Chase and Baker. I mean, just huge banks. I mean, like you're a great customer for 70 years, and then all of a sudden, you run for politics. Now, your political opponent is taking the weight of the government, putting pressure, debanking you, going after you, trying to charge like insane fines. I think they had some $300 million fine or something, $350 million fine. They tried to go after him with in some civil case. At the same time, they were trying to shut down his bank accounts. I mean, it's hard to believe that this is happening in America and Western civilization, but we're seeing just this total abuse of power. You mentioned that Trump used a executive order to kind of say, hey, this needs to stop now. The main issue with this, and what I've seen over the past 8 to 12 years, is that during the first Obama administration, they leaned on the government to exploit this infrastructure to debank industries they did not like, whether it be guns or porn or marijuana, whatever it may be. And they payday lenders with Checkpoint 1.0, and they essentially, this went to court and they lost in court, and the court said cease and desist immediately. This is totally unconstitutional what you guys are doing. Well, those same people went back into the shadows, and then on Biden's second administration, they were all put back in positions of power. And what did they do? They did the exact same thing, after Trump's first administration, where he had put, I want to say it was a guy who worked at Binance or Coinbase. He was like he became the, I want to say his name's I want to say Giancarlo, but I could be wrong. But Trump put him in a position where he was head of the OTC or head of something, one of these financial organizations, and they put in the charter, hey, we are not going to politically go after people. We're not going to make a political, we're not going to weaponize these government agencies to go after our political opponents. And he put that in the charter. And then the second that Biden won his election, supposedly won his election in 2020, the first thing they did was repeal all of those things and immediately start targeting industries they didn't like, which crypto and Web3 and technology and innovation was one of those things they went after. What are your thoughts on that?
Is extremely important that you mention this, because the way to do deep institutional changes is not to appoint one person or to make a superficial cosmetic change to a regulatory issue. You need to totally rebuild the regulatory structure. You need to rebuild the Bank Secrecy Act in this case, because the way they are trying to solve the situation, and it's very important that you mentioned that this actually happened before, is that they will appoint somebody and they will say, no bank is allowed to deny the bank account for political reasons. But actually, this solve none of the problems, because it's a deep regulatory issue. It's a reform that has to be done at the anti-money laundering level.
Congressional level, basically.
Right now, the way anti-money, yes, you need to totally redefine or reshape the way financial compliance is done. As you know, because you mentioned before, anti-money laundering rules are vague, complex, subjective. They depend on arbitrary criteria. And because of these factors, then there's the subjective factor, complexity factor, ambiguous factor. Then they're very easy to be weaponized or politicized or manipulable in direct or indirect ways. Direct way is when a regulator, for example, has a direct bad intention to debank somebody. Indirectly could be if a regulator has just a negative connotation of a specific subset of customers, industries, political ideas, etc. And indirectly, they transfer their own biases into their compliance assessments.
There's a term for this. I can't remember what it's called. It's called, what is there? There was a term that they used, the Biden administration used, that was completely subjective. And then I think
they use reputational risk.
Reputational risk, that's the term. Reputational risk to whom? I mean, like that's such a subjective thing that basically allows you, whatever you think the reputation is, you can just decide. I mean, that's just completely absurd. I think this is
there's a lot of factors.
Yes.
For me, like somebody should be denied of a bank account if there is proven criminal activity, for example.
Yeah.
But the reputational risk, and which is one sort of subjectivity. What is interesting is that there is many other subjectivities. It's just that administration, again, is such an underexplored topic that only a few of us have really gone deeper. That's why I'm very passionate about it, because such an important topic and it's so understudied. There is many people who are expert on taxes, for example, on tax regulation. Other people are experts on trade policy, healthcare, etc. But on financial compliance and anti-money laundering rules, not so many. So reputational risk, as you mentioned, totally subjective factor. In the US, there's something called the Camel rating system, which is the way supervisory financial agencies rate financial institutions. And one of those factors is the management side of it, which is the M in Camel. That one has all these reputational risk kind of criteria that can be, again, extremely subjective. Because let's say that you have a regulator on one side that doesn't like cryptocurrency. You have the regulator on the other side who they don't like, and a specific group of, I don't know, immigrants. They can both use this reputational risk to force financial institutions to stop engaging with these clients. And that's the problem. Because then financial institutions will just defensively avoid any kind of controversy. So they will start debanking anything that can represent a problem for them, because they can also be fined for subjective reasons. So a bank can be fined not for a crime inside their bank, exactly, not for anything real, but for subjective criteria. And that is extremely risky.
It's obviously there's so many problems that need to be resolved here. What is I guess my first thought too is something one of my friends, BJ, he helped lead the Canadian trucker convoy, and then he actually got his bank account was wiped from existence. If you read his book, Honking for Freedom, he talks about this. Like, he just tried to log in and they said, you don't exist anymore. This is true story. Yeah. So, because what they did was they basically said the government in Canada decided that these truckers all of a sudden are terrorists because they're parking their trucks in the city or whatever. They're terrorists now. They're like, so they basically use that to basically wipe them from existence, to like take their bank. Like, sorry, you go to log into your bank account, you don't exist anymore. What happened to all my money, all my stuff? Who knows, right? What do you think about that? I mean, that's like
so his bank account.
Literally
interesting. His bank account was not even frozen; it was disappeared.
Frozen. It was disappeared. He was disappeared. They said, you sorry, you don't exist anymore. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And what happened at the end?
I think eventually
at the end he
I believe that the pressure was so intense from what the Canadian government was doing, and I think this is ultimately what one of the reasons Trudeau was kind of stepped down, but this was one of the things was they basically escalated this protest, this peaceful protest. They escalated it into basically calling these people terrorists and saying that they started arresting them, and they started wiping their bank accounts, saying that, hey, if you donate to these people, you're a terrorist. Now, anybody that donated to them, they got kind of crazy. I mean, it's hard to believe that could happen in the West, in the Western world, that was even possible. But that's what they did in Canada. So, but eventually, I believe he sued, or something happened, and the backlash from the public was pretty intense, and I believe he did get that stuff back eventually. But that being said, because I think those people, this Chrystia Freeland or whoever that was in charge there with Trudeau, I think they tried to use some opaque way to debank people. They didn't want the public to know what they were doing, but eventually there was a bunch of proof that they were doing that. So kind of crazy, very crazy to see that happen in the Western world. But that it just goes to show you the nature of what you think is really yours is not really yours, right? Like, money you put in a bank account, could be frozen at any time, could be stopped at any time. So you just have to be. I mean, it's a risk to be aware of, right? Obviously, this hyper political, polarized world we're living in right now.
We need to find ways in which we create financial safeguards for people, financial protections for people. Because imagine if you work your entire life to put together your savings, and you work your entire life, you pay your taxes, you pay your duties, and you have this money in your bank account. And then from one day to the next, something happens, and this money can be frozen. Either because somebody intentionally wanted to froze you this money, or because you didn't do anything, and you just let it go. And then you have this money in your bank account. And then from one day to the next, something happens, and this money can be frozen. Either because somebody intentionally wanted to froze you this money, or because you didn't do anything, and you just let it go. And then you have this money in your bank account. And then from one day to the next, something happens, and this money can be frozen. Either because somebody intentionally wanted to froze you this money, or because you didn't do anything, and you just let it go. And then you have this money in your bank account. And then from one day to the next, something happens, and this money can be frozen. Either because somebody intentionally wanted to froze you this money, or because you didn't do anything, and you just let it go. And then you have this money in your bank account. And then from one day to the next, something happens, and this money can be frozen. Either because somebody intentionally wanted to froze you this money, or because you didn't do anything, and you just let it go. And then or because of bad regulatory issues, and then this money
Yeah.
was flagged and was frozen. This is the life worth of somebody.
Yeah,
And for me, as somebody who comes from Venezuela, I saw how in my country people lost in 1 week their entire life savings because of hyperinflation. So
yeah,
it's
man,
really personal for me. That's also why I'm focused on this. Sorry.
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what happened in Venezuela. I mean, that's a whole nother issue of like, governments abusing the ability to print money, right? So, yeah, I have a couple friends from Venezuela. I've got some crazy stories. I mean, I know one lady basically saved her whole life to, she was a grandmother, send her grandchildren to college. She had her life savings, and literally within a week or two, she went from being able to send her kids to college to like barely being able to afford a flight to fly to the United States. I mean, that's crazy, right? And it's disgusting what they did. I have another friend, like I've told this story a couple times, but he was leaving Venezuela. This was years ago. And, this is when I first kind of was like, oh my God, crypto is going to be a thing, because I watched this video game I was playing. There's like this money in the video game that stores value over time better than a lot of these government currencies. So this guy was like leaving Venezuela, and said like what he wanted to do was essentially he bought a bunch of these jewels inside the game because he was going to the United States. He wanted to hold his wealth in this video game item as opposed to leaving it in Venezuelan bolivars. So he sold that, got the jewels, and then flew to the United States, and then resold them for US dollars in the United States. It was kind of wild, crazy.
It is wild, honestly. And I have so many similar stories of people that by the time they collect their paycheck, by the end of the month, the entire month work was valued as enough to buy a piece of gum. This is what she told me.
That's unbelievable.
People that lost their entire savings. And this story that you mentioned about the video game is a true story and happened to many Venezuelans, in which there was a particular video game, international video game. I just don't know the name, don't know the details, but many Venezuelans it was something that apparently could be run in a very kind of low level internet, etc. So it's a specific game, and people start playing with it because that was actually the way not only to earn money but to keep money. So apparently they were trading in this game and they were saving money somehow. But it's a real story, and people can look it up. There's like stories about it. People can, So that's again like what we want is a system in which people can just be their life money can be protected, and you have your banking access until you make a crime or something.
This is why I'm so passionate about Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin is an apolitical, global, neutral money that can't be debased by governments. And that's what I tell people. And Bitcoin should be your savings account, right? I mean, it can't be taken from you if you learn how to do self custody and you spend a little time to learn how to store your Bitcoin. That is a money that government can never take from you, that nobody can take from you, that nobody can even know you have, right? So it's a way to protect yourself and protect your life's energy and life's work.
Do you think that's why also Bitcoin is also growing so fast? Is because people are realizing this fact? Do you see this is one of the main drivers of it?
Yeah, I think the value proposition of Bitcoin has never been more clear. As we watch, all the stuff happen in the West, as we watch, governments weaponize the banking system against political opponents, as we watch, different governments get into wars and have problems with other governments, and then, stealing reserves from other governments, the current financial system is this is why BRICS is becoming a thing, right? Because they don't want to be policed by the United States of America, right? So, I think the world is moving towards a standard where money will be apolitical, neutral, as it was for most of human history with gold, right? So, gold was essentially, call it God's money, right? Natural money. And we're moving back towards, it just really does feel that way, that the tides are shifting. And, I'm not saying fiat currencies will go away anytime soon, but you're going to see the growth of Bitcoin, the growth of people. I mean, you look at gold and Bitcoin are near all-time highs. I mean, that's the market is telling you that, right? So as we continue to move here, and governments will continue to print money when they have a problem. So you'll see that, right? But I just feel bad for people who have been told, hey, save your whole life, put your money in a bank account. And then even in the United States, right? We talk about Venezuela, but in the United States during COVID, the government printed like 40 to 50% of the dollars that have ever existed, right? So, 45%, 40% of, if you were saving just holding dollars in the bank account, you lost 40% of your purchasing power literally, in a couple of years, right? So as that worked out, as we saw inflation play out, as we saw the cost of everything go up dramatically, right? You basically got stolen from.
Yeah, it's unfair.
Your life's energy got stolen from you, right?
Yes, it's unfair.
You described this happening in Venezuela within a couple of weeks, right? I mean, that's like how fast your life's energy got stolen from you. The beautiful proposition of Bitcoin is that can't happen to you because there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and no government can come in and say, hey, there's more Bitcoin, right? So I think as a savings technology, that's where Bitcoin really, really makes itself important. And I think even if Bitcoin doesn't become used as a medium of exchange on a daily basis, the ability to have a money that you can save in, I think that is that is such a big deal, so powerful. Like, you can use Bitcoin if you want to buy things, but it probably makes sense for bigger purchases. But just to have a money where you can park your life's energy that governments can't steal and pilfer from, so powerful. That you can't get debanked. You can't, for some opaque political reason, some unknown financial action task force can't come and say, hey, we closed all your accounts and we're not going to tell you why. Or, you go to log into your account and you were part of a peaceful trucker convoy protest, and all of a sudden, hey, sir, sorry, you don't exist anymore. There's no customer with a record of your name at this bank, right? So, things to be aware of. These are non-zero risks, right? And Bitcoin is that insurance option against all of those risks.
Yes, I mean, like what you are saying is extremely interesting, because what the market is telling you that exactly gold is at all-time highs.
Yeah.
Number one asset in terms of market share. Bitcoin is the same thing. And at the same time, there is a lot of people trying to protect money in different ways. There is something that I always mention, which is the term that I called house banking. Which is people that are trying to buy as many properties, as many houses, apartments, condos, to find ways to protect money.
Well, that's exactly
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't want to cut you off. So finish your thought, and then I'll add to your thought.
Oh, okay. Yes. People are buying into gold, Bitcoin, house banking. The three things, even though they're vastly different, and I believe Bitcoin is superior to the other two by far, it really shows that people are trying to allocate resources and protect them in these ways. They don't see investment opportunities that are extremely attractive, and they don't see, obviously, fiat money, dollars, as a way to protect your wealth. So what people do, they buy Bitcoin, they buy gold, or they do house banking. Out of the three, I believe the most problematic is actually house banking, because we want people to be able to afford apartments, to be able to buy houses, buy apartments. So if you have all this wealth, this extra wealth going into the real estate market, this is partially the reason why young people cannot afford houses anymore. It's because of the incentive. The money is flowing into this asset class. So Bitcoin is really important, I believe, to also take away influx of money from this asset class into, I believe, a superior way to store this extra money that has to be protected or wants to be protected. So that way people can actually afford houses.
And again, this is another example of the second and third order effects of a broken money, right? So people don't realize this, but this is a prime example. I think my generation is the first time in the past 100 years, 200 years or something crazy where our generation is worse off than our parents' generation. I was lucky that I did well financially. I was able to buy, property, etc. But I have tons of friends. Most of my friends, most people I know can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford to have a family. How do you think this affects the civilizational decline, the birth rates? I mean, there are so many second, third, and fourth order effects from all this that people have no idea about, right? Why is housing gone up so much since 1971, right? I just did a book series a couple months ago with my friend Dominic Frisby, who wrote Daylight Robbery, which is the history of taxation. And he has such an interesting statistic in his book. where he talks about for like 1,000 years, the houses did go up over time in value, right? But it was like point something small percent per year. It was like 0.25% a year or whatever. The property went up, and then after we went off the gold standard in 1971, houses went up like 9%, 10%, something crazy every single year. Where why is that? All of a sudden, did all of a sudden houses and property? I mean, they've always been scarce, but did they all of a sudden just like massively, become more valuable? No, it's just that people intuitively feel the debasement of fiat currency. So what do? They buy property to protect themselves from that, right? It's asset inflation at its core, right? You're really kind of seeing that happen and play out. People want hard assets. They don't want to be debased. So even if they don't intuitively understand that, they feel it, and that's acted on, right? When we saw the whole COVID thing, all this money was printed out of thin air, right? And then all of a sudden, people are like, "Oh, why is BlackRock buying up all these houses? Why are they buying up all this single-family homes?" Right? People are talking about this. Why is housing costs, 50% since COVID, 60%? Well, because they printed a bunch of money, and the people who were able to access that money first, was it you or me? Was it the little guy? No, it was BlackRocks and these huge institutional banks that were plugged in and well connected to the money spigot. We call this the Cantillon effect. What did they do? They turned around and they got that money first before the inflation hit, and they started buying hard assets. And what did that do to everybody else? Well, it screwed everybody else over. You might have got a $1,200 check, but your rent is now $1,000 more per month every month. So good luck with that. That's what we've seen play out.
Yeah, totally right, actually. And it's very interesting because in the 1970s, many things changed from 1971. I know that every now and then on Twitter, you have this kind of question, like what happened in 1971? But you are right.
In my studio soon. We're gonna do a series.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Look, I mean, in 1971, it's just fundamental year because exactly you broke this relationship between hard assets and money.
Yeah.
And again, like if you think about the way gold, Bitcoin, all these things have behaved this decade, so similar to the 1970s. It's really similar. And I believe I had this conversation with a friend, also Bitcoiner. His name is David Foley. He's in Boston. And he also, again, he showed me the graph. He showed me the charts between 1970 to today. And he has, again, this thesis about how Bitcoin will reach, I believe, 3 times or 4 times the current market share. Again, because money doesn't know where to go. Money doesn't know where to go. There is this influx of capital that doesn't know where to go because of all the uncertainty, geopolitical conditions, something that some people called, in general, stagnation of investment opportunities. Secular stagnation is called, to be precise. So I really believe in that. You mentioned before the effects, the political and sociological, societal effects. But look, if people cannot afford housing, if they cannot see a better future, if they cannot get married, they will not have children. And that's the most important thing, right, in our society, to be able to have children, to have families, to have strong communities. Everything that we do because we want to have a better future for our family, for future children. And right now, the young people, they just feel so pessimistic about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying. I mean, children are literally a call option on the future. Are you optimistic about the future, right? Like, that's what it comes down to, and then when we see our generation having way less children and not being able to afford homes, I mean, that's, the second, third, fourth, fifth order effects from that are catastrophic, right? I mean, we need the next generation to, to prosper and to support the previous generation when it comes to all this stuff. I mean, you look at a lot of societies. China is a prime example of this, where they tried to use communism to control how many children people were having, and now they're in a situation where the demographic pyramid doesn't look good, right? They got all these people that are aging, getting older, and there's not enough children to support that anymore, right? To help continue society in a productive way without massive catastrophic implications.
Yes, I was the other day in South Korea, and they were telling me something like for every 100 people today, they will have, I believe, 3 grandchildren.
Oh my God!
And that means that that means society is just collapsing. It means that your heritage, your costumes, your traditions are gone. And exactly as you mentioned, is really a calling of whether you are children means that you are optimistic about the future, that you want to build for the future, that you want to leave a legacy, not only a financial legacy, but a societal legacy, because you want to have good community, good country, good democracy for your children. But if people then don't have children because they don't have a house, because they feel they don't have the money to do so, and then they reach to an age in which they cannot have children, then it creates a vicious cycle in which society is not building for the future. And it creates this also very, again, hedonistic, materialistic mentality of consumerism that doesn't have anything beyond that. So it's really, really sad society, because the West became great also by embracing this idea that you can build something transcendental for the future.
Yeah, I think it's it's what you just described, this materialism, all these little widgets, all this, crap basically that people just spend money on, spend. That's a result. I mean, that is literally Keynesian economics. I mean, that was what Keynes said, the idea of animal spirits and this idea of, hey, we just always have to be spending. We always have to be producing. And I think there's a famous conversation between, I want to say, Friedrich Hayek and John Maynard Keynes, in which, Hayek said, what about the long run? And then I think Keynes responded, well, in the long run, we're all dead. So it's kind of like this cultural rejection of like, let's think about the future, right? Hayek was saying, hey, what about the kids? What about the future? How is this going to affect? And Keynes basically said, who gives a shit? We're all going to die. What does it matter what happens in the future, right? That's kind of the idea of that thought. When you kind of explore the philosophical underpinnings of some of these economic philosophy and thought. So interesting little side note there.
Yeah, look, right now, the way, for example, all governments are going into debt, insane amount of debt, is just spending today a debt for the future. I believe right now the number is that 20% of the government budget is interest rate payments. And by 2035, it will be 40% of the US government budget in interest payments. That literally is the definition of being bankrupt on the future. Yeah. And eventually somebody has to pay the bill, because countries are rich today, but it can be poor tomorrow. This is the story of Venezuela, the story of Argentina. This is the story of even Canada, who is now way poorer than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So US right now is the richest country in the world, but they need to protect it. They cannot be spending the way that they're doing right now.
It's definitely got out of control, and I think there's a lot of debate, especially politically, about this issue in America right now. And I think historically, there's this point of no return. I think when your debt to GDP becomes over 120 or 125%, and we're like right on the edge, the razor's edge of that right now. So we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, obviously there's questions of tariffs and all these different things. Well, tariffs are a tax, so do they bring in more revenue? Does it make up the shortfall? Who knows, right? Are we going to keep printing money at this rapid, absurd pace? Most likely, because that's what governments do historically. Every time they have the ability to print money historically. This is not the exception. This is literally the rule. It would be an exception if they didn't do this, because every single time a fiat currency has essentially catastrophically failed historically, and a government will always abuse the power to print money. That seems to be the rule, not the exception.
Yes, and young people are waking up, I believe. I think young people are waking up to this fact.
Yeah.
They are much more politically engaged. They are much more economically oriented and focused in the US, in Europe, and internationally. In Europe, all the statistics, all the polls, they show that the number one issue of the youth is cost of living, affordability, the economy.
Yeah.
In the US, a lot of people are supporting the Trump administration because they have seen how their standards of living how their economic prospects have been totally decimated in the past years, how so much money is going into programs or foreign wars, etc.
Yeah.
And they're waking up. And I want to also take this opportunity to mention that I am deeply, deeply disturbed, sorry. I'm extremely sad and also angry about what happened to Charlie Kirk last week.
Yeah, man. It's
It is really one of the best spokesmen, one of the best people. I have many friends who are very close to him. And it is really a shocking and totally degrading experience. And it really shows the need to bring back civil discourse and conversation. Because what he was doing is just motivating young people to be
yeah.
socially aware, economically focused, and politically committed. And for that reason, he was assassinated.
Yeah, I think when we can no longer have a civil debate discourse, when somebody whose whole modus operandi was literally, hey, let's just talk. Let me go somewhere where people don't necessarily agree with me, but let's sit down and have a conversation. And anybody can come up to the mic. We can talk. We can discuss. Promoting nonviolence, and then to see some absolutely deranged subhuman do that to him in front of his wife and children. I mean, I think, and then to see so many people on the current left celebrating the assassination of a husband and father in front of his two young daughters. I mean, that to me just I think it's no longer a issue of left versus right. It's really good versus evil at this point. And it's sad to see because the left that I remember, the kind of like Democrats of the 1990s, 2000s. I mean, that's literally been absorbed now into the Republican Party. This idea of kind of being anti-war and true liberalism, and for all the stuff that I've seen, basically people saying this crazy things about Charlie. I mean, the guy literally was, people would come up and they would try to pin him against different groups of people, whether it be gays or whatever, and he would reject that. He'd basically say, hey, this movement can absorb anybody. We may not agree religiously with what they're doing in their private life, but that's their private life. We want them to be a part of this movement. And he used Jesus, whether you are religious or not, he used him as an example to say, hey, Jesus would spend time with prostitutes. He would welcome anybody. He would sit with tax collectors. You know what I mean? He didn't judge people based on their personal decisions. He would try to show them truth and motivate them and care about them and love them. And I think, there's been plenty of videos of Charlie doing just that. So I think, not many things have deeply affected me in the past couple of years, but watching that and seeing people, glorifying his assassination and saying it's justified, it's like there's a mental illness that has taken over a broad swath of society, and it's kind of scary to see people that I've seen so many people. I mean, I don't know how it's simply just it's simply like good versus evil, right? Like whether you disagree with them or you agree with them, there's people that I disagree with. I disagree with Bill Maher sometimes. I disagree with a ton of different people on what would be considered the left, but I don't wish for their assassination, and I would never celebrate somebody's assassination that I disagree with. I mean, that just to me is just an evil thing to do. So yeah, it's been. I had a pretty good conversation, a pretty good Cypherpunk'd episode we recorded with CJK, and he's very religious, so he offered some theological insights, but it's worth a listen. And we went deep on the whole Charlie Kirk assassination. So it's a sad day for America. It's a sad time for America when we're at a crossroads like this, and to see people celebrating that kind of violence, I think is just absolutely disgusting.
Is deeply sad because in Latin America, for example, we are very used to presidential candidates being shot. Recently, a senator in Colombia was assassinated as well, a young guy as well, Miguel Uribe. And we have these episodes all the time. And that is also in the US. As you mentioned, I have no problems to talk to people with different political ideas, whether it's social democrats, libertarians, conservatives, people at the center right. If you have a minimum amount of civil discourse, respect, love for the country, if you don't see your political opponent as an existential enemy, if you don't degrade people's humanity, then you are fine. You can debate whether there is more taxes, less taxes, whether there is free trade, whether or not free trade,
Yeah,
whether you need to have more safety net, less safety net, more public transportation, less public transportation. All those things are fine.
of
What
course.
is not fine is to reach a point in which you demonize your political opponent, you
Mhm.
make them a degradation of a human being, and you call people for violence. This is when countries really go into the drain. This
Yeah.
is when civil wars happen. And this is when countries really stop progressing. Uh, is really shocking.
Yeah, man, I'm pretty shocked. I couldn't believe what I was seeing on my social media timelines with people, the things that they were saying. I just, I couldn't believe that this was America. But it does make sense if you look at what's happened the past couple years, where the left has controlled the media, the colleges, the institutions in the United States, and people are no longer believing the media. They no longer listen to them. But you've got just absurd things being said. You've got you know, uh, not all Democrat politicians, but you've got many of them, calling Trump a Nazi and Hitler and all these different things, and that really does diminish how horrible someone like Hitler was when you compare somebody who's never killed anybody, never just an average politician, and you call him, Adolf Hitler, who literally killed, 5 million people or more, right? And started one of the most violent, bloody wars that ever happened in the history of humanity. So that rhetoric that's been happening, right? I think has really, now you have freedom of speech in America, right? You can say that, like, J.B. Pritzker from the Chicago guy, he can go on and call Trump Hitler and a Nazi and all this stuff. But don't be surprised when you call somebody your political opponent a Nazi or Hitler or all these things, and you brainwash the population on media for so long, where you diminish what happened to the Jews and all the people who died in World War II. You diminish their deaths by calling somebody who's not a Nazi and not Hitler, right? And then don't be surprised when people act on that, which is what we've seen. So it really is horrible.
Yeah,
And I agree with you. The public discourse, the conversation has to change, and we can't do that. I mean, Trump, he's obviously not a perfect person, but he's all of his jabs and stuff that he says. I mean, he's like, he'll call somebody that he doesn't like, he'll give him a nickname. I mean, you know what I mean? Oh my God, he's Adolf Hitler because he made a nickname or a joke about somebody. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. None of that rhetoric has been violent. This just it has to stop. We, like you said, we can debate on ideas and thoughts, and that's what America is all about. But it really does seem like something has changed recently. And these institutions that are obviously, they've lost the war of ideas, right? Because Trump got reelected in a landslide, won all of the swing states, all that stuff happened, and now the ideas have been rejected. The American population is rejecting a lot of this leftist ideology, the communism, all these kind of woke, institutionalized racism, whether it be DEI, all these different things. It's been rejected by the American population, and we're returning to a meritocracy. But they're not going down without a fight. It seems it's like when you can't win the war, when you have the media and you have all the institutions and you still can't win the war for ideas, then it turns into a literal kinetic war, which is what we're seeing here. I mean, the murders, the attempted assassinations. It's a sad time. It's a sad time, and then just to see people celebrating that. I mean, that's what really blew my mind. It's like I can't believe. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe seeing, the celebration of that, the glorification of that. It seems like there's an infestation of mental illness or something going on. I don't know.
Yes, there is. I really hope everybody, conservatives, Democrats, independent journalists, podcasters like you, people like myself who are more analysts or who lead organizations, people who lead company, everybody, we should join a campaign for moderation of our tone,
Yeah.
of bringing back consensus, bringing back tolerance, not allowing anybody to speak about political opponents the way we have been seeing. And I think we all need to join this campaign. come together to really call out the people who are advocating for extremism, radicalism, violence, and have zero tolerance towards that. And one of the philosophers that I enjoy reading the most is Karl Popper. And he has this phrase that says that you need to be intolerant against the intolerant. Because if those people continue spreading hate in our society, magnifying their messages, more of these things will happen. And it will not end well at all. When it comes to institution, what you mentioned, institutions have in part been failing because they lost their original purpose and everybody's trying to do politics. This is such a massive issue. The purpose of the media is to inform the population,
Yeah.
is to give the news, is to update the people, is not to take sides. The
That's-
role of universities
It's not journalism.
is to
It's
teach the truth. The role of universities is to teach the truth, is to educate the next generation, is to bring civic values to young people, is to teach people how to think about the world, whether it's economics, politics, law, engineering. And the role again of politics is to do politics. The role of business is to do business. And everybody, they do very well their role. You have a society that functions and move forward. But right now, what you have is everybody doing politics. We need to stop that, honestly. And everybody needs to focus on their own function so that we can all respect each other and then we can move forward.
You're not wrong, Jorge. I mean, again, I think you hit the nail on the head. That, the media, instead of informing people, it's instead of journalism, it's become activism, right? There's no real journalists anymore. Many of the journalists, like Michael Schellenberger and Glenn Greenwald and great independent Matt Taibbi, great independent journalists are no longer part of those media apparatuses because they didn't want to go along with the programming and the radicalization and the activism that was occurring there, that still is occurring there, right? And then, like you said about educational institutions, it's no longer education; it's now indoctrination, right? Indoctrination into my political thought process, which is totally disconnected from the free market at this point, right? We've thrown record amounts of money at education system in the United States, and we went from being the best education system in the world to now we're not even the top 30 anymore, right? So, but yet we throw more and more money at it every year. I mean, that to me, that's the definition of insanity. You got these like teacher unions and all this stuff that they're like, they're upset and they're saying, blah, 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 you're canceling the Department of Education. Well, every year we give you more money and every year the kids get dumber. So what is happening here? How could you possibly be upset? The problem is there's no connection to the real world. There's no feedback mechanism. It's like we talked about with the bank secrecy stuff and all this anti-money laundering bullshit. There's no connection to the real world of reality. So even if you're claiming, hey, we're doing this for a good reason and a good cause, okay, well, are you actually getting results? And the answer is no. So not only are you wasting time, money, adding bureaucracy, hindering progress and business and opportunity and capitalism and creating more financial exclusion, but you're also not solving the problem that you tried to set out with in the first place. And that's my biggest problem with so much big government is that there's never really any accountability. If something is not going well, the solution is throw more money at it, give them more money to incompetent people who make this problem even worse, right? That's what's happening. Like in the real world in business,
This is a
if you don't produce with your business, guess what? You go out of business because you weren't providing a service to the world. Well, the government's the opposite. It's, hey, you're doing a worse job. Here's more money, and that's the problem, right? We don't have an independent way to do cost benefit analysis and to figure any of this stuff out. And we got to figure out a path forward here because what's going on, like you've said, is unsustainable with the debt and all these different things. It's not working and it's unsustainable. And I'm just coming to an age where I'm becoming more politically minded and more civically active and caring more because I'm growing into the world and like what the hell is happening, because this is horrible. We got to fix this.
This is something that is, again, it is very important to understand that concept, that in the private sector you have the pricing mechanism and you have the market mechanism coordinating people, coordinating agents. You see where there is inefficiencies and you fix them. You see what is working and you finance more of that. You see supply and you see demand. But in many sectors of life, you don't have the pricing mechanisms. One of them is government. One of them is universities, who are financed by governments. Because if you take your average state university, you will have great professors. great professionals in the engineering department, at the finance department, at the PhD level. In fact, the best research internationally comes from the US. It's the most powerhouse. But at the same time, you have all these incentives to finance the minority of more radicalized professors and specifically administrators. Because again, you don't have this market mechanism. Something that I have been speaking with a good friend of mine, Wayne Layton, is actually how can we bring market incentives to the world of policy and at the same time the world of non-profit, because you see all these inefficiencies going on simply because of how asymmetric the information is, the lack of incentive, the lack of price signaling mechanisms. And we need to find ways to fix this, because we live in an economy which we may like it or not, but that was 50-60% of the economy is run by government, is run by public spending.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So you have a huge chunk of the economy not operating under the price signal.
Yeah, and that's why it's getting progressively worse and more, discombobulated, right? Capitalism is the expression is capitalism is the best worst system we ever had, right? There are some unfair aspects of it, but it's the best system we have for human progress in the history of humanity. I mean, if you just look at a chart and you just see the human progress and the standard of living and everything go through the roof, but the more government you stack on top of that, you get the opposite. You don't have a good price signal. It's the opposite. It's, hey, you're doing a bad job. Here's more money, right? Look what's happening in California with some of this clownery that's occurring. I mean, they gave the guys $3 billion and they made what, half a mile of railway. I mean, obviously that's fraud. Obviously money is stolen. I mean, who knows, right? But this is what we're dealing with here, right? You're taking money from productive people in society that are driving progress, that are employing people, that are helping people get ahead, and you're redirecting that money away from the productive people to governments to basically do a worse job on everything, right? I mean, literally, objectively, the test scores have gone down. Kids have gotten dumber. More kids are illiterate than ever before. And then you've got woke communists literally radicalizing children with worse test outcomes, focusing on institutionalized racism, essentially, not wanting to go back to work because they're in a union, and we don't want to go back to school. Let's keep the kids out of school for another 8 months and have 15 masks on. I mean, that's what you're seeing. I mean, there's no price mechanism, there's no incentive that says, hey, if you're doing a good job as a teacher, we'll pay you more money, right? That's what we need. We need, hey, are your kids, are their outcomes increasing? Are they getting better, right? There's got to be a way to do this. I've thought about this for a while. It's like, hey, you take kids that you got in your class and did all of your students improve? I mean, they could all be F students and you get them and now they're C students. Okay, you've improved their outcomes. Here's a reward for that. Here's a financial reward for that, right? We need to figure that out. I don't know what the total solution is, but what's happening now, just throwing more money at it and outcomes are going down. We went from number 1 to being, under 30, it's not working, right? Scores are going down, outcomes are going down, kids are getting dumber. What we're doing right now is not working. So that's why I fully support Trump ending the Department of Education, because it's been literally the Department of Uneducation.
Yeah, and look, there is clearly solutions to this problem. We don't need to even reinvent the wheel. There is bonus kind of a structure. There is incentives you can create, financial and non-financial incentives. So there is actually many ways in which you can reward people in sectors that are technically not fully market-oriented sector. It's just a matter of whether we have the political will or not. Something also very important, I believe, for us to say in the show is not only the amount of money that is being consumed or spent by government in percentage of GDP, it's also the allocation of that money. We're talking that 20% of the government spending is interest rates payment.
Yeah.
That money is gone. The amount of money which is actually used for, let's say, reinvestment purposes from the government spending budget is actually being declining. So the money that is being used for research and development, the money that is being used for infrastructure to make America more efficient, more productive, more economically inclusive, all this has been going down. What goes up is the inefficiencies, the entitlement programs, the subsidies to consumption. because you have two ways to help people. You can make them more productive, more economically included, more wealthy, more educated, or you can make them consume more in the short term. You can pay for their bills. You can reduce income inequality by subsidizing their income. But that only fixes the issue in the short term. That only fixes their issue tomorrow. What you need to do is the money that you collect on taxes, the money that you use for government, is actually to make people more productive, to make them more efficient, to make them more educated. Because that way they will be able to produce by themselves enough money tomorrow, in a week, in a month, in a year. You make them autonomous and independent.
It goes back to the famous quote, right? Like you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man a fish, he eats for a lifetime, right? It's the same concept. What you're describing, I mean, that goes back thousands of years throughout history. I mean, that's like, I think that's a quote from the Bible, right? So it's a biblical quote, you know?
Yes.
So like, this is nothing.
Yes.
New, right?
And what are we?
There's nothing new here with what you're describing. And I think they did that I think they ran an experiment in California or something where they did the UBI, where they gave people some money. And I think the result was, after like a year or two, those people were no better off than they were to begin with. It hadn't really affected their lives in any way.
Yes. And what are schools teaching our children? Are they teaching them about finance, about AI, about critical thinking?
Nope.
They're not.
No,
they're really not. They're not.
Yeah, I mean, the educational system is based. It's like based 60, 70 years in the past. I mean, it's the same educational system we used when we were like in World War II. You know what I mean? Like, it hasn't changed. It hasn't updated. There's very little movement. It's very slow. You know, they're not really preparing, you know, our children for the future, right? You don't learn. I mean, literally, when I went to high school and in like middle school, in like the public education system, it was literally a daycare center. I mean, that's really what it was. It was a giant daycare. I mean, it was a government-run daycare. I mean, more people, very little learning, in my opinion, was going on. You know, it's
yeah, exactly.
But you know,
I mean, like, it's totally true. Like, again, like, we're not teaching them the tools they need for the future.
Don't learn about credit.
They don't understand how to use.
Don't learn about anything. You know what I mean? You don't learn about budgeting, investing, like nothing. None of that, really. You know,
nothing. They don't know how to pay taxes efficiently. They don't know how to finance their own purchases efficiently. They don't know how to build businesses. They don't know how to think critically. One of the things that I really believe education is lacking right now is teaching kids, teenagers, university students, how to think critically, how to analyze the pros and cons of decisions, how to analyze the consequences of decisions, how to analyze the consequences of taking a loan at 20% interest rate to buy a car that you cannot afford. And then because of this person will spend 10 years in debt and will be living paycheck to paycheck. And because of this person will not have his or her own dream job. It will have to have any job because you have all this debt. And then you will have a life that is not fulfilling. So you will not have children. And then you will not marry correctly. And then you will go into too much alcohol, into too much drugs. So you have all these effects that come from lack of financial and economic literacy at an early age.
So what's funny that you mentioned this is that, you know, I told this story, I can't remember on a different podcast, but a lot of the stuff that we finance today, like I found a bill for like a car that my grandfather had bought, and it was like $600, and he just bought the car. I'm like, I showed my dad. I was like, what is this? He's like, he just bought. Oh, did you buy a car for $600? Like a brand new car? He's like, yeah. He's like, you just bought cars. Then there was no financing. It was like you bought the car, right? But now, because of the kind of the exponential increase in fiat currency and how that affects people on the lowest, you know, rungs of the totem pole, the kind of the disparate wealth inequality that kind of creates. You know, now we've got all these schemes where we're financing cars for 7 years. It used to be 3 years and 5 years, and now it's 7 years. You know, and you watch this play out with mortgages. I mean, they're talking about doing 40-year mortgages now instead of 30-year mortgages. And if you go to Japan, where this has really played out, I mean, they have 100-year mortgages on a house in places like Japan, right? They try to make the numbers work for people that can't afford it, right? That just like it's a, you know, it's basically you live in it's like a debt slavery almost. It becomes, right?
Yes, and Exactly. And something that I heard the other day by Charlie Kirk, God bless his soul, is that there's all these companies that offer people to fragmentation of payments for everyday purchases.
Yeah,
You
that's
can buy an iPhone or you can
yep.
buy whatever, and you can fragmentate that. You can buy Uber Eats, these things, and just pay in parts, right? And they're not regulated like normal credit
Mhm.
companies. They have different ways of regulation. And they have, of course, insanely high interest rates.
Mhm.
And again, in general, it's just also cultivating this consumption mechanism.
Mhm.
Because you also, okay, you talk about your grandfather who bought a car by $600. I'm pretty sure also at his time, he was not spending money on all these ridiculous things that people are spending money.
Yeah.
Again, because of all this consumerism mindset. And again, it's all very problematic for the way to build a society for the future.
I think that's another. I bring this back to Bitcoin. I mean, that's a whole. It's a. It's part of the underlying culture of a sound money, of a hard money, where it becomes this idea of low time preference as opposed to high time preference. Right now, we live in a society where it's high time preference, where every little thing, you got to have it now. You got to have it. Why do I got this little consumer item? I think Bitcoin as a culture brings you back to a low time preference, long term thought. If you become a Bitcoiner, you kind of adopt this ethos, this culture, this philosophy, where no, hey, I don't have to spend right now. I don't have to just, take my life's energy and just boom, every time I get paid, I spend it all, right? It's a different economical system. It's a more thoughtful system. It's more optimistic about the future, right? Because if you think about some of these economic systems, one is, hey, spend everything right now because I don't know about the future. I have no intention to even think about the future. And then
Right.
Bitcoin, it makes you think about the future. It makes you plan for the future. It's a more responsible way to conduct yourself culturally and philosophically.
Exactly. And that's what people should be doing, actually. Like, there is something called consumption inflation, which is like you make more money, you spend more money. And this is honestly a total mistake for people, because
Mhm.
then people make a bit more of money, so they buy a more expensive car, and they not even buy it. They had to go for credit at a 10% interest rate or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of the never-ending rat race. Wow, I think we've almost been talking for almost an hour and a half, Jorge. But let me bring you back. Let's bring us back
Right.
to our original conversation about your recent article. Before we wrap up here, let me ask you
course.
a final question. I think last week Congress had a hearing, just about kind of this issue, all the stuff that you're talking about. What do you think is the most realistic step as we close out here that we can take to structurally reform this issue of debanking? Have you been following? I guess in the U.S. there's the Congress, but have you been kind of following different coalitions and with senators or governors, or congressmen? What's the plan? What's the best option we have here? How do we fix this issue?
Yes, on this debanking issue, which we have actually met with over 70 offices in Congress since March. So we have met with people at the Financial Services Committee, virtually any committee, trying to explain how to solve the situation. What we are trying to organize a hearing, by the way, try to specifically do a hearing on the Bank Secrecy Act, the Financial Action Task Force, etc. So if I had to say concrete, immediate steps that we can do, first one, I really believe that we need more data, transparent data. So we need to know how many people have been debanked and what are the reasons for their debanking, so that we know the scope, the magnitude of the problem. The second thing that we need to do, we need to create a system in which financial compliance becomes way more objective, simple,
Mhm.
and non-arbitrary. There has to be standard, objective criteria that I believe has to, for people to be banked or not. If somebody commits a crime, of course, froze their bank account, do whatever. If and a crime by a court in the US, not by a court in another place.
Mhm.
But if not, people are innocent until proven guilty, especially when most people who are being debanked, they're debanked because of compliance issue. In
Yeah.
Europe, 89% of cryptocurrency companies have faced debanking problems. In the US, you already know how many people have faced the same, how many cryptocurrency companies, etc. The third solution, I also believe, is that there has to be some sort of due process mechanisms for people to restore their access to financial services. There has to be a due process mechanisms in which you can prove you're innocent, and then if you have that, you must have access to financial services in the US. Why? Because in today's world, if you don't have a bank account, as you know, you are not part of society.
Yeah.
You cannot pay rent. You cannot have a job. You cannot pay suppliers. You cannot do anything in society. So there has to be a way in which people have a due process to restore the banking access. Full banking access, by the way, not because they know some people who propose very small accounts kind of solutions. It doesn't solve the problem. If you give somebody a small account solution, you cannot do much with it. There has to be also, I believe, a place in which you preventively secure access to financial services if you are in an industry that is under attack or that could be under attack. For example, if you are a journalist, if you're a nonprofit, if you are a human rights activist, or in this case, if you are part of the crypto assets community, there should be ways in which before you are being debanked as a result of bad regulation, you can actually clear everything about your compliance in advance. So preventively protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because what is happening right now is that also you have a company and you lose your bank accounts, and then you have them again in 2 months. Maybe you're already bankrupt. So we need to find, I believe, these immediate solutions, and eventually at the end reform the whole Bank Secrecy Act. I really believe that's like the fundamental reform that the US has to have, not only to ensure financial inclusion, but also financial protections to your personal data, which is yours. It has to be protected. It's your personal information, and you need to have a right to protect that data from others.
Do you have a congressman or a senator or somebody who's willing to champion this legislation? And with these ideas you're proposing, is there anything in the works right now to propose as a bill that can be voted on with this, or is this still very preliminary?
Yes, we're working with a couple of Congress people to do this. I just cannot say names to protect the integrity of the process and to make sure, because you also never know. Things need to be in written, they need to be published. And then when we do that, I'm happy to come back to the show and tell you a bit more about it.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation today. Where can people find you, Jorge? And do you have any other final thoughts for everybody who's listening?
Likewise, it was fantastic conversation. They can follow me on Twitter. They can also email me. My email is jorge@econinclusion.org. Send me an email, send me a tweet, especially if you are interested on these issues of debanking or if you have been a victim of debanking. My final thoughts is actually congratulate you for the show. I know you since the summer of last year, and I always follow the episodes you have been doing. And you're just a fantastic production, fantastic team.
Yeah.
And I hope to visit you at Naples soon.
Well, be in DC.
It's a fantastic.
Are you going to be in DC at BTC in DC?
Sorry?
Are you going to be at BTC in DC?
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking there. Are you going?
I'm going to be there. I'll see you there. I may or may not be.
Amazing.
We'll see.
Sorry, what?
I said I may or may not fill in to moderate a panel if somebody can't come through, so we'll see.
Okay, amazing. Hopefully, So, okay, we'll see you there. And let's grab some coffee and let's catch up.
Great conference, BTC in DC. If I think Bitcoin Day, which we run, one of my team members, JMD, he does a lot of this stuff for Bitcoin Day, and they are collaborating with BTC in DC. So I think if you want to, I think there's a code where you can get a discount if you want a ticket or if you're in the area. But the lineup is stacked for BTC in DC. It's going to be really a great conference. So I can't wait. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there, my friend. So check out Bitcoin Day if you want to get that discount code and if you're interested in getting a ticket to BTC in DC. So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, let's talk. And actually, I have a university in Florida interested on doing a big Bitcoin event for their students.
Oh,
It's a college of business.
what college?
It's Florida Atlantic University. So it's very early stages,
Okay.
but let's talk about it. Maybe we can work together, put something through.
That'd be awesome.
Because I see again, like we need to keep spreading the message.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I see that there is nothing done in the kind of Boca Raton, Palm Beach area is where we can also attract many good people.
Okay, awesome. Jorge Jraissati, did I say it right? Jraissati. I always struggle with. Is it Jraissati or Jraissati?
Is Jraissati.
Jraissati. Did I say it right?
Perfect. Amazing.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Jorge, and I can't wait to see you in DC.
Likewise, my friend. See you in a month or in a couple of weeks, actually.
Have a great day, brother. Thank you.
You too. Of course.